Her eyes, once bright with anticipation, now looked dimly toward the world. Years had passed, and each one seemed to whisper the same cruel truth. It's over. Her children had grown distant, the friends she loved had departed, and her house, once full of laughter, now echoed with emptiness. She walked slowly through the rooms, touching objects that once carried memories of joy, a faded photograph, a cracked teacup, a worn chair, and each one reminded her that the story had ended long ago. There was no excitement in her mornings, no dreams for her afternoons, no expectation of wonder in her evenings. She believed quietly and with a heavy heart that God had finished her chapter, and all that remained was to endure what was left. She woke each day with the same sluggish heaviness. The alarm sounded, the sun rose, but nothing seemed new. Breakfast tasted the same as yesterday, and yesterday tasted like every day before it. Even the birds outside seemed indifferent to her presence. She would sip her tea, stare into space, and wonder why she still bothered to rise. It wasn't sadness that struck her. It was the quiet despair of life that felt drained of meaning. She tried to pray, but the words came weak, empty, as if the well had run dry long ago, and so she remained, moving, breathing, existing, but no longer truly living. The chair across from her remained unoccupied. It had once been her husband's, but now it was merely furniture. Each piece of the house seemed to mourn with her. The walls held echoes of laughter, the table held crumbs of old meals, and the windows framed memories of days long gone. She sat quietly, watching sunlight drift across the floor, and imagined it was still warm with life, but it wasn't. No one came to visit. The phone rarely rang. Even the neighborhood children had grown up and moved away. The emptiness pressed against her chest, reminding her at every step that life had slowed, and her story seemed finished before it had truly ended. She used to dream. Small things at first, a walk in the park, a visit from a friend, a sunny afternoon. But as the years wore on, the dreams faded. They were replaced by practical thoughts, what to eat, when to rest, what to do until the next day arrived. Hope had become a word from another time, something she remembered but no longer felt. She avoided looking forward, avoiding any thought that might stir longing only to leave her disappointed. The quiet of her mind mirrored the quiet of her house, still, empty, resigned. And in that quiet, she whispered for the first time in months, "Lord, perhaps my life is finished." Each beat of her heart felt heavy, as though it carried the weight of decades. Loss had become her companion. Her husband gone, her friends scattered, her children distant. Even small joys seemed too much to hold. A smile felt forced, a kind word felt empty. Her body moved through the motions, but her spirit had grown weary. Sometimes she would sit for hours, hands folded, staring at the floor, and wonder if life was meant to be endured rather than lived. And in those long hours, she whispered a truth she hadn't admitted aloud. "I have no more strength to hope." Her mind often drifted backward. She saw memories clearly, the laughter of her youth, the embraces of family, the dreams she once held tightly. But each memory was tinged with sorrow. They reminded her of what had slipped away rather than what might yet appear. She rarely looked forward. The future seemed empty, grey, irrelevant. Even prayers to God felt futile. They seemed like letters sent into a void with no expectation of reply. And so she lived mostly in the past, carrying its shadows in her chest, while forgetting that a new chapter could begin. The nights were the hardest. She would lie awake, listening to the wind, counting the hours until dawn. Sleep brought no comfort. Dreams were empty or filled with reminders of what she had lost. She tried reading, listening to music, even praying softly, but each method only emphasized the silence around her. She would sigh, long and quiet, as if the sound could fill the void that no one could see. And she waited, not for a miracle, not for joy, simply for the sun to rise and mark another day. Even in this waiting, Jesus was near, unseen, patient, preparing a beginning she could not yet perceive. One night, exhausted from years of carrying despair, she whispered softly to the empty room, "Maybe it's over, Lord. Maybe there is nothing left for me." There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness, only the quiet resignation of someone who had tried and failed. For decades, she had lived with small hopes, all of which seemed to crumble. She felt like a book with the last pages torn away, a story unfinished, abandoned. Yet in the stillness of that surrender, something shifted. She did not see him, she did not hear him, but his presence, gentle, unwavering, rested upon her heart, preparing the way for a beginning she could not yet imagine. The following morning, she woke with the same heaviness in her chest. Yet something felt different. Not dramatic, not visible, but subtle, like a soft hand resting upon her shoulder. She couldn't see him, couldn't hear a voice, but she felt a warmth that did not belong to the sun, a quiet reassurance that she was not alone. Her chest loosened. The tight knot of hopelessness began to soften, as though someone had whispered, "I am here." For decades she had believed she must carry the weight alone. Now she realized she did not. The presence stayed near, even in the small tasks of daily life, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, breathing through the ordinary moments. It was not forceful, it was not urgent, it was simply faithful, gentle, and patient. As the days passed, she began to notice small changes. The sunlight no longer seemed indifferent. She watched a bird landing on the windowsill and felt a flicker of wonder. A note from a distant relative made her smile softly. It was as if her heart had been dormant, and now tiny sparks were igniting inside her. These sparks were fragile, sometimes almost gone when she tried to hold on to them. But they were real. For the first time in years, she felt a hint of expectation, a whisper in her soul saying, "Life has not ended. Something is beginning." Even in her weakness, Jesus was planting the seeds of renewal. Tasks that once seemed impossible now felt lighter. Even walking across the room no longer exhausted her completely. Her hands, once trembling, moved with a quiet steadiness. She did not understand why she felt this new energy. It wasn't her own strength. She had not earned it, nor could she explain it. And yet she knew someone was giving it to her. A gentle encouragement, unseen but palpable, lifted her spirit every morning. The heaviness of hopeless years was slowly replaced by a confidence she did not create. Jesus was beginning again, not in loud miracles, but in the quiet restoration of her own soul. She began noticing the little things first. A neighbor smiled and lingered longer than usual. A stray bird landed near her garden. A warm breeze carried the scent of flowers she hadn't noticed in years. It was as if the world, once grey and heavy, was slowly being rewritten around her. The soft nudge of life returned. Small choices, small joys, small moments of wonder. She realized slowly that Jesus was at work, not forcing her life into a new story, but gently beginning a new chapter in the pages of her soul. Even in her old age, even in her weariness, he was starting again, showing her that endings are never truly final when he is near. She started noticing little things she had long ignored, the softness of a morning breeze, the sunlight playing across the floor, the sound of children laughing in the distance. They were small, almost insignificant, but each carried a hint of life she had forgotten. For years, she had felt as if her world had ended. Now, each tiny joy felt like a gentle invitation. There is more ahead than you thought. She smiled quietly to herself, realizing that life could begin again, even after decades of endings, even after sorrow had seemed eternal. Her heart, once still and cold, was learning to stir with hope. And in those small beginnings, Jesus whispered softly, "I am starting again with you." Each sunrise became something precious, not merely the start of another day. She began to notice the patterns of light on the walls, the way shadows shifted across the room, the scent of tea brewing in the morning. She even began to ask herself quietly, what might happen today? Curiosity, something she thought she had lost long ago, returned slowly. She walked to the window and watched the neighborhood stir. For the first time in years, the future felt alive, like a blank page she was invited to fill. Even small tasks felt meaningful. She felt present. She felt awake. For the first time in decades, she sensed that life had begun again. It started with little things. She opened the door to greet a neighbor. She offered a smile to a passing child. She prepared a small plate of food for someone in need. Nothing grand, nothing heroic, but each act carried a weight she had not felt in years. Each small step forward felt like a miracle. Her body was fragile, her heart wary, yet she moved with purpose. She realized she had been waiting for permission all along, and now she had it, not from anyone else, but from the one who had never left her. Even the simplest actions became sacred, because he had begun again in her. Her heart, once closed and heavy, now opened slowly, like a flower after winter. She welcomed the world, the neighbors, the children, the sun, the rain, the quiet moments, with an acceptance she had never known. Life no longer seemed like a burden to endure. It became a gift, each day an opportunity to see and feel what had been hidden. She began to speak again, not with hesitation, but with a quiet assurance. Even in her old age, she found herself laughing softly, dreaming softly, living softly, but fully. Jesus had begun again, and she was learning to walk in the new life he was offering. One breath, one step, one day at a time. Her heart, once closed and heavy, now opened slowly, like a flower after winter. She welcomed the world, the neighbors, the children, the sun, the rain, the quiet moments, with an acceptance she had never known. Life no longer seemed like a burden to endure. It became a gift, each day an opportunity to see and feel what had been hidden. She began to speak again, not with hesitation, but with a quiet assurance. Even in her old age, she found herself laughing softly, dreaming softly, living softly, but fully. Jesus had begun again, and she was learning to walk in the new life he was offering, one breath, one step, one day at a time. One quiet afternoon she paused in the garden, hands resting on the worn wooden fence, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves. It struck her slowly, like a gentle truth settling over her heart. This new life, this quiet awakening, was not the result of her own effort. Every step of courage, every tiny joy, every morning that now held expectation, all of it was him. Jesus had been at work, even when she thought everything was over, even when she had believed life had ended. She whispered softly, "You began again, Lord, even when I could not see you." And in that whisper, she felt complete. Her story was now his story, and it was just beginning. Her mornings, once grey and heavy, were now filled with purpose. Even small acts, brewing tea, sweeping the floor, tending her plants, carried a sense of sacredness. She discovered meaning not in grand gestures, but in the quiet, consistent moments that made life worth living again. Her heart, which had long believed it had nothing left to give, was now generous, awake, alive. She no longer measured life in years or regrets. She measured it in moments of presence, in breath, in light, in love. And every evening, as she watched the sunset, she whispered, "Thank you for beginning again, Lord." When her time came to leave the earth, she did not fear. She walked gently into his arms, feeling a love she had never fully known before. Her story, once thought finished, now unfolded in eternity. She understood that endings are never final when Jesus begins again. Her heart, her life, her soul, all were renewed, living in the peace, joy, and hope he provides. And in heaven she laughed and loved anew, carrying with her the truth she had learned: nothing is truly over while he is near.